You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to episode 165 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. This week, I'll be sharing a Step 12 story, and this came to me via a program friend whose sponsee wanted to share his story on the podcast, but wanted to remain anonymous. I had my friend Ben, who was on episode 146, actually record the letter that was sent in, and more on that later. For this episode, I originally planned on sharing a first step that was recorded at the Noon Zoom room back in June, but I lost the file. Many times I record first steps while I'm at work, and I usually transfer the file to Dropbox so that I can edit it once I get home. I thought that I had uploaded the recording and deleted everything in my recycle bin on my work laptop, but recently realized that I didn't upload the file. I'm going to try to recover the recording or just set up a new time to record the first step for a future episode. This is the first time in 4 years of the podcast that I actually lost a recording. There were a few times that I thought it might have happened, but it ended up saving. So anyway, big oops on my part. Back to this episode, I picked out a reading from the Green Book on Step 12. And I know that I read this on the first episode of the podcast, but I thought it fit well for this one as well. And this can be found on page 59 of the Green Book. And again, Step 12 is, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we try to carry this message to other sex addicts and to practice these principles in our lives. So about the middle of the page, our message is simple and profound, that recovery from sex addiction is possible through working the 12 steps of SAA, and that following this program results in a spiritual awakening. Each of us carries this message by means of the wisdom gained through working the program ourselves, rather than through ideas or theories borrowed from someone else's experience. We are not experts, only sex addicts sharing honestly with one another. Our authority comes from our experience. We share what we know, how we got here, and how the SAA program has worked for us. When we carry the message directly to other sex addicts, we connect with them in a way that non-addicts cannot. We speak from experience. We've found that telling our stories is one of the most effective ways of carrying the message. We tell about our sex addiction, the pain, sorrow, suffering, and despair it brought, how we tried to stop and control it, and how our efforts failed. The way our lives became unmanageable, the loss and suffering our addiction brought upon ourselves and others, and how we finally found recovery. By telling our stories, we demonstrate that we truly understand where others have been, and by sharing our recovery, we offer hope and show that there is a way out of our common addiction. There are many other ways to carry the message. Any service we do that helps bring our message to other sex addicts is in the spirit of Step 12. And I will stop there. So yes, anytime someone shares their story here on the podcast is an act of service in the spirit of Step 12. Usually we have either like a first step recording or a recording at a meeting, or I have a conversation with another addict and we get to share our stories that way. Sometimes I get emails, and this one was a bit longer than an email, and instead of having me read it out, I decided it would be really nice to have another sex addict record the letter that was sent. So I approached Ben, who had just gotten some new equipment for his recording studio, and Ben has been recording a lot of Answers of the Heart entries for a Microsoft Teams community that we have. He shares the recordings there, and I really love his voice, and he's been wanting to break into voiceover recordings. And so I thought it would be a perfect opportunity for him to share service here on the podcast, as well as giving my voice a break. And so now, without further ado, here is Ben S. reading a Step 12 story shared anonymously from a member of SAA. I hope you enjoy it.
My sexual addiction behaviors started when I was very young. By the age of 10, I had already participated in various sexual explorations with people my own age. By the age of 12, I was objectifying girls in sexual ways and acting out regularly. By the time I reached high school, I believed that I was a full-blown addict, and that is when I started to ignore serious potential consequences to my addictive behaviors. Once I went to college, my addictive behaviors only increased. In my mid-20s, I married my wife, and we started our life together. All along the way, with occasional pauses of varying lengths, I continued to act out with my behavior gradually worsening over time. I would set myself boundaries that I wouldn't cross, and eventually would cross them. I also continued to seek out new ways to act out. As time went on, I continued to push the envelope of my addictive behavior, putting myself in danger to significant, life-altering consequences. All the while, I was lying to everyone in my life, especially my wife. We had set firm boundaries as to what was acceptable behavior, and I violated those boundaries regularly. Everything came to a head a few years ago, when I crossed yet another uncrossable boundary. Once I crossed that boundary, my conscience finally got to me and I could no longer live the life that I had been living. I was compelled to confess to my wife. Once I told her what I had done throughout our relationship, she wanted me to leave our home. I agreed to do so and I went to stay at a hotel. That's where I discovered SAA. After I confessed to my wife, I had to move away from home. I had two goals. One, to address my addiction and get on the road to recovery. And two, to get my family back. I knew that to achieve these goals, if even possible, I was going to have to reprioritize my life and work very hard. The night I left my home, I found SAA. I had wondered for years if I was a sex addict, as I heard about the addiction periodically in the media. A quick reading of the SAA website made it very clear that I was, and that I needed help in dealing with my addiction. I attended my first virtual meeting that night. In hindsight, it wasn't the best group, but it did get me started. I immediately dove into reading the Green Book and tried to learn as much as possible about both sex addiction and addiction in general. Those early days were very difficult. The realization that I had lost my family and all that I had worked for was devastating. To help deal with the situation, I was attending multiple SAA meetings a day. It took all that I could muster to get through each day. The 3 circles helped with this immensely. Though I didn't have a sponsor yet, I worked on what I thought were things that belonged to my 3 circles. I used the 3 circles all the time. If I found myself falling into my middle circle, I'd find an online meeting and attend. Slowly, over time, I found I didn't always need to go to a meeting when I recognized middle circle behavior, and I would just redirect myself to an outer circle activity. Through the first few months of my recovery, my wife was still conversing with me. Those conversations were easily the most difficult of my life. I had destroyed her world. She wanted answers, and I knew that if I didn't oblige, there was no path to regaining my family. Her devotion to our child allowed me to maintain a tenuous connection to my family, helping with homework being the primary avenue. Oddly enough, it was COVID that played a role in my wife and I being able to reconnect in a meaningful way. A little over a month after my confession, my wife got COVID and I helped both her and our child during the course of her illness. She appreciated that, and when I came down with COVID 6 weeks later, she returned the favor, allowing me to stay in our home during my illness. When I had recovered, she invited me to return to our home, permanently. I joyfully accepted and have been living back home since, about 3 years. There are other things that played major roles in me being able to return home. One was therapy, both individual and couples. At first, my wife was only interested in couples therapy in order to figure out how we could effectively co-parent. In the meantime, I had gotten under the care of a psychiatrist who had put me on anti-anxiety medication. In addition, I started to see a personal therapist, I was very lucky in my choices of all the professionals that I had started to work with, and I am still working with them today. The final, and likely most important, was SAA. I took my participation in SAA very seriously. I read the Green Book multiple times, as well as Voices of Recovery. I had found a very good virtual group, did my 90 and 90, and began searching for a sponsor. It took me a good while, 7 months, to find a sponsor. Once I did, and began to work the steps, my recovery really accelerated. I've been very methodical in my step work. First of all, I wanted to do things right and leave no stone unturned. That required me to spend more time on each step than I would have if I had just worked quickly. For me, that has led to a lot of positive results. Step 1 was very easy for me, as I was ready to release all the secrets about my addiction that I had held inside me for so long. Writing and then reading through my first step story was incredibly cathartic, and the acceptance of what I had done and that I needed help was important. Step 2 is difficult, as I'm not a spiritual person. It took me quite a while to figure out what my higher power would be. I finally decided that it would be my family, as they are the most important part of my life, and would provide the motivation that I needed to continue my recovery journey. Once I had put in all the work and completed Step 2, Step 3 was pretty straightforward. At the time I was working Step 3, I had already returned home, albeit on somewhat shaky ground. Deciding to turn my life over to my family was essentially what I was already doing. I only had to acknowledge it. Taking an inventory of my life was very educational for me. One of the things that stood out were all the negatives that I could find within myself, while there were very few positives. I suppose that's just part of my psychology, as I have a tendency towards perfectionism. It's easy for me to see and admit what is wrong, and very difficult to see the positives. Step 4 was one of the steps where I benefited the most from my sponsor. He helped me draw out the character flaws that had led to a lot of my resentments in life, which significantly helped me as I was able to work with my therapist to mitigate. Poor self-esteem and selfishness were 2 character flaws that really stood out while making my inventory, which led to a lot of my issues with personal relationships. Working with both my therapist and sponsor helped me to become more selfless by performing service for others, as well as helping me see the positives of how I was evolving as a person to bolster my self-esteem. Like Step 3, Step 5 was pretty straightforward. I credit my sponsor for not rushing me through the steps and making sure that I was certain I was ready to move on before I went to the next step. Step 6 took a while as I needed to work through the psychological implications of letting go of my character defects. They had been with me for so long that there was trepidation and concern about the person I would become without them, and how that would affect my life. Similar to Step 3 and 5, Step 7 was straightforward, as I had prepared myself to have my shortcomings removed while doing Step 6. Again, I didn't want to move on from Step 6 until I was ready for my shortcomings to be removed. Though all the steps have been effective and rewarding, Steps 8 through 11 have been the most effective on my life. It was difficult to write my amends for all my wrongdoings in Step 8, and it took me a long time to do so. Again, I wanted to be as thorough as possible, and it was difficult for me to admit the wrongs I had done. But I methodically worked through each of the letters I needed to write, until I had completed the task. Moving on to Step 9 required me to do a lot of evaluation on any potential injury I would cause, with providing a direct amends. Because that probability was so high in many cases, the number of people that I provided direct amends to was small. My sponsor was very helpful and supportive in helping me identify the right set of people to provide direct amends to in person, and which people I should make amends to through alternative methods. Step 10 has been easily the most successful and easiest step for me to implement. Taking the daily inventory and making sure that I make amends quickly has changed my relationships with people across the board. Executing Step 10 has given me a lot of practice in trying to see other people's perspectives on situations, and has improved my relationships and also prevented me from developing resentments against people and situations. Step 11, unlike Step 10, and more like Step 2, was very difficult for me to implement. As I stated before, I can easily find the negatives in situations, so it is difficult for me to start each day with a positive affirmation and positive attitude. However, starting each day on a positive note is exactly what I needed to do in order to be successful with working Step 11. My lack of success with Step 11 was causing me to get frustrated. When my sponsor stepped in and told me exactly what I needed to hear and what I think is an important lesson, that is, not all the steps will be the same. Some will be easier than others to execute. Some will provide you with more benefit than others. Just keep working. It's about progress, not perfection. That brings me to Step 12, which is why I'm writing the story. I hope my experiences that I have written down here can help others who are on their own recovery journeys. It's important for me to stay involved with the SAA community, and writing my story, I hope, will allow my experiences to outlive me and provide hope for others. Interestingly enough, to me, at least, my sponsor and I have been working on ways that I can provide service, and we've had some hits and misses. The person who had the idea to write my story was my couples therapist, who herself is a recovering addict, though in another program. Both my sponsor and I thought it was a good idea, so here I am. Up to this point, I've been discussing my journey through SAA and my step work. I'm now going to spend some time on how my life has evolved. Above, I mentioned the difficult conversations with my wife and me being able to move back in with my family. My wife is the type of person that needs to know everything, so there were a lot of late nights and early morning conversations, going over the details of my other life over and over and over again. A major fear of hers, then and even now, is there is more to my story than what I have told her. As I stated earlier, I confessed to my wife regarding my addictive sexual activities. She was blindsided, as I had been lying to her for nearly 30 years, and any time she had some sort of inkling of what I was actually doing, I was very successfully gaslighting her. Based on that history, she has no reason to believe that the gaslighting has stopped. She has been dealing with significant PTSD over my addictive behavior, as once I confessed, her world was shattered, as a lot of what she believed about me simply wasn't true. One of the most difficult things for her to understand, let alone accept, is that I'm still the person that she thought I was. There was just more to me than she knew. I am and always was dedicated to my family. I just never realized the damage I was doing to it with my addictive behavior. I thought that the only person I was affecting was myself. I couldn't have been more wrong. My addictive behavior both could have and did affect my entire family. Beyond the obvious fallout since my confession, there was damage done prior. Long before my confession, the intimacy between my wife and I had been significantly impacted. I chalked that up to just part of life, but it's clear to me now that my addictive behavior significantly contributed to that. In addition, my addiction had effects on all other aspects of my life. I simply ignored any potential consequences and put myself in positions that could have led to disease, unemployment, prison, and or death. I was very lucky in the sense that I didn't suffer those consequences. In addition to effects of my relationship with my wife, my addictive behaviors affected all other relationships in my life. Acting out had become a stress relief for me, and whenever I was stressed, acting out was priority one in my life, regardless if it caused me to sacrifice time or emotional presence with my friends and family, or potentially expose them to my behavior. In addition, my life at times revolved completely around acting out. This led me to lie to everyone in my life. It was only after I started SAA that I fully realized that I had no integrity, which hurt me greatly, as I've always held myself up as a person who does. Building my integrity has been something that I've worked hard on since I started SAA, and at this time, I can say that I'm living the life of integrity that I've always wanted to. Though things are personally going well in regard to recovery and living the life I want, there is still significant work that needs to be done. My wife's psyche is very damaged due to my actions and my lying. She's the type of person that trusts others completely, as she did with me. She has said that she always believed that I loved her for who she was, But now she simply doesn't believe that is the case. Otherwise, I wouldn't have lied and cheated for all those years. In addition, my actions have caused many lifelong insecurities that she has about herself to rise to the surface. These consequences of my actions have not only destroyed her trust in me and has her questioning herself, but have affected all aspects of our lives. Psychological triggering happens at times, which can make her question whether or not our relationship can survive. The damage that has been done and the ongoing consequences are very hard to deal with for both of us, and we're both unsure where our life together will end up. But we are committed to continue the work through these times, and hopefully, our relationship will not only survive, but thrive. To conclude, I don't know where my life will end up, but I am committed, through the help of SAA, to live a life of integrity and continue on my road of recovery for the rest of my life.
I really appreciated hearing this story, and I love the way he was highlighting the steps and how they impacted his recovery, and ultimately being able to be of service in step 12 by sharing the story here on the podcast. And again, thanks to Ben for doing this recording. It's really awesome. He and I use the same recording software, so we've been sharing some tips on how to get the best sound out of it. But yeah, super grateful for that. For the rest of this episode, I am going to be reading some listener emails and sharing some music. There are quite a few emails about guests wanting to share their stories, and I'll get to those here in a minute. Yeah, so this first one is a short one coming from someone who used to be at our noon Zoom room, talking about Albert's first step, which was on episode 162. And it says, "Hi, Jason. Here is A from Germany. What a powerful story. Being gay, I relate to it so much. I struggle with deciding which is my worst addiction. I wish to come back to the room soon. Love, A." I replied saying we'd love to have him back at our meetings whenever he is ready. So thank you for sharing that. The next few are people who wish to share their story here on the podcast. This first one says, "Dear Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast team, my name is Jay," full name listed, but I'm abbreviating it to just Jay. "I'm a sex addict in recovery and a regular listener of your podcast. I am originally from another country and moved to the US when I was younger. Hearing others share their stories on your show has been incredibly meaningful to me, especially as someone who understands what it's like to carry the struggle while trying to build a new life in a new culture. I'm reaching out with a lot of humility and hope to ask if there might be an opportunity to connect and possibly share my story on your podcast. I believe in the power of honesty, and I know how valuable it can be for someone out there to hear from others who have walked a similar path. Please let me know if this is something you would consider, or is there a process that I should follow? Thank you for the work that you do. Your voice and platform are helping people like me find hope one episode at a time. Sincerely, Jay, Sex Addict." Yeah, and thank you so much. And yeah, the basic process is emailing me, and I'll be able to find a time where we can set up a Zoom link and we can record an episode. I think I've talked about it here on the podcast before, that I've gotten a lot of emails from people with books or treatment centers, coaching sessions that want to be a guest here on the podcast. And that is something that goes against our traditions, and we do share stories from sex addicts in recovery and SAA. And we also share stories from COSA members. On the new version of the sexaddictsrecoverypod.com website, we'll have a spot for what it takes to be a guest here on the podcast, what we do allow and what we don't allow. I do have a response that I send out to people who are outside of the realms of SAA, letting them know who we are and what we do. And I'll usually specify it to whatever their situation is. But my response is, "This is Jason, host and producer of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. Thanks so much for your interest in the podcast. A little about us. The Bay Area Intergroup of SAA follows the 12 steps and 12 traditions of Sex Addicts Anonymous. In doing so, we feature stories and reflections of members of SAA. According to our traditions, we carry the message of recovery through the program of SAA. As addicts in recovery, we do talk about therapy and other outside help during our conversations. However, we do not promote outside causes or issues such as books, treatment centers, or other recovery programs, etc. If so-and-so would like to talk about working with members of SAA or sharing his own experience in working the program of SAA, we would be open to having him as a guest, but we would not be able to promote his podcast or his coaching services. Gratefully in recovery and service, signed Jason. And so, yeah, that one was particularly set up for someone who was wanting to promote his podcast and coaching services. But yeah, for anyone in SAA, they are welcome to send me an email and we can see what we can do from there. Okay, for this next one, I did have to make a few edits here and there to remove specific names of locations and people. But beyond that, the email remains intact. And it says, "Dear Jason, I hope this message finds you well. I want to reach out to see if I could share my story with your podcast. I'm a graduate with a degree in religion and hold a Master of Divinity. From 2012 to 2014, I served as a missionary in Ghana, followed by 6 years in pastoral ministry, first as associate pastor and later as senior pastor. During my time serving as pastor, I was secretly watching pornography, and at the height of my addiction, I was watching up to 8 hours per day. In 2020, my life took a devastating turn when I was arrested and subsequently convicted for sharing child sexual abuse material. I take full responsibility for my actions and the deep harm they represent. I served 19 months and was released on September 19, 2023. During my incarceration, I led Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous programs focusing on recovery and accountability. I'm currently under supervised post-release until 2028 and am listed on my state's sex offender registry. Since my release, I have remained committed to personal growth, healing, and serving others. I attend church regularly and am employed by a family caring for their properties. While I understand that my legal status may represent a barrier to being on air, I am hopeful that my testimony of redemption, coupled with my education and ministry experience, may be seen as a strength in connecting with and guiding others who face deep struggles. I'd be honored to contribute and would love the opportunity to share with your audience. Please let me know if you have any questions. Signed, T. And yes, I will be reaching out to you. I think you would be perfect for the podcast. And just note, I did take out a lot of information that was in the email that had some specifics around churches, universities, and people's names. Beyond that, I think you would be a perfect guest for the podcast. We have had guests on the podcast that do struggle with the same things and have been arrested and are on the other side of incarceration. So yes, you would be a perfect guest for the podcast. This last one that I want to read is quite lengthy and has some musical suggestions that I will be playing some here in the body of the email using post-production, and then at least one other one at the end of this episode. And this one says, "Hey Jason, I'm really enjoying the Sex Addicts Recovery podcast. I started from the beginning not too long ago, and I'm at about episode 45. So I haven't caught up yet, but I really appreciate hearing others' stories and experiences. Music has been a huge part of my own recovery. I came into another sex addiction fellowship, SA, about 10 years ago, but it wasn't until about 4 years later that my recovery really turned a corner and I started to experience a profound alteration in my outlook on life and in my relationship with my higher power. And so much of the shift that happened had to do with forming a new concept of and having a profound spiritual experiences with my higher power through music. I used to listen to a lot of just regular popular music, and I grew up with a feeling of disdain for Christian music that I inherited from my family's opinions. But around the time that I had the spiritual awakening that I talked about, I had some friends who were really connecting with Christian music as a recovery tool, especially messages about surrendering to a power greater than oneself. And as I started listening to some of the music they shared with me, I found messages that I really needed to hear that helped me connect with a power greater than myself, that is far more loving and tenderhearted than I had imagined previously. Someone who's always there, who never abandons me even when I mess up. who's not afraid of my spiritual mud and doesn't need me to be perfect before helping me. Someone who delights in me and thinks that I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, no matter what I'm doing. And someone who never stops gently inviting me further into the light, joy, and serenity my soul yearns for. Very few things help me connect with my higher power and heal my soul as much as music. Time after time, I've found new songs that have helped me tap into yet another message I needed to hear or yet another emotion I needed to process. I could go on, but here's a short list of songs that have really helped me connect with places within me that needed healing or something greater than myself. I'm going to list out 4 that he mentioned here. Belafonte by Brawley, another song by Brawley, and this one is called Till the Light Breaks Through.
You never really show it, you never really let it out, but I can see heaviness when I look in your eyes. You wake up in the morning from another dreamless night, wiping up tears that fall by the cigarette pipe. Go lay down your heavy armor. This peace in the valley where you lay. I know that you hide under the dark to be safe. Just know that I'll be waiting with you until the light breaks through.
Another one called Find My Home by Shiny Penny.
I am sinking in the water and I feel alone. And I am chasing after things I can call my own. But those things that keep on failing me, they don't give what I need to find my home. To find my home. Sometimes I wonder why I'm breathing. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I want the things around me to give me hope.
And finally, Be Free by Jeremy James Whittaker. If you want to take a deeper dive into music that really speaks to my soul, I have a 3-hour playlist on Spotify that I call Absolute Treasure, consisting of songs that just nail it for me in different ways. Some are my favorite dance party songs, because the God I know now loves a good dance party as much as I do. Hashtag Outer Circle. Others are just beautiful reminders that I am not alone, that I'm seen and known and loved, and that it's going to be okay. I don't know if you have Spotify, but here's a link if you want to check it out, or just try out a handful. I've since left SA and switched to SAA within the past year, since it's more LGBTQ friendly and I realize that I'm gay and that's okay, and that I don't align with SA's sobriety definition or approach to recovery anymore. There aren't any local SAA meetings in my immediate area, so I'm trying to start my own with the help of a friend from SA. But I'm doing the best that I can with what's available to me. Thanks again so much for the podcast and for sharing the music that speaks to you. It's always interesting to me to hear and learn how others connect with their higher powers. Signed, B. P.S. You're welcome to share anything in this email on the podcast. And P.P.S. If you happen to know anyone who might be a good SAA sponsor for me long distance, let me know. I get the impression that you are well connected and might be able to help me find someone that's a good fit. No pressure, just on the off chance. I've worked all the steps before, but of course needing a new take on them is always beneficial. And having someone with the SAA perspective on recovery would be helpful since I'm somewhat new to SAA. I've been making great progress in my time in recovery, but it seems as though something still eludes me in breaking through to conscious abstinence from inner circle behavior. I discovered Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, ACA, less than a year ago, and I suspect that program might hold the key to what's missing for me. I've also been focusing my attention there for a while, but I think it would be good to have an SAA sponsor as well. If someone comes to mind that you can connect me with, let me know. Someone that can hold space and have empathy for the complexities of being gay, in addition to being a sex addict, would be especially helpful. Wishing you all the best in your recovery. Awesome email. And yes, I have listened to your playlist and I've pulled out a couple of other songs for a future episode of the podcast, but I am going to be playing a few of these in the body of this episode. And a couple of other things. Number one, I can also help you in setting up a new SAA meeting. I have helped set up several meetings and know some of the things that need to be done. For anyone looking, there is a group starter packet that the ISO provides that has a lot of great information. There's also registering the meeting with the ISO and any local intergroups that you might have. But yeah, I can be of help there. In terms of finding a sponsor, I will definitely keep my ear out. I know that you can email the ISO at info@saa-recovery.org, and they do have a list of people who are able to sponsor remotely. A lot of the meetings that I go to have sponsor lists or phone lists, and a good way is just reaching out to people whose recovery you relate to and or admire and ask them if they have the ability to take on new sponsees. So yeah, I will be getting back to you about a lot of the stuff in this email, and thank you so much for that. So I've played 2 songs already via post-production in the body of this email, and the other song that I wanted to play here afterwards was the song Be Free by Jeremy James Whitaker. And yeah, this one was just awesome. It was instrumental and really, really loved it. So here that is right now. Awesome song. And yeah, thank you so much for the song suggestions. And like I've mentioned before, I did check out your Spotify playlist called Absolute Treasure and have found a couple of other songs that I connect to. And I will be saving those for a future episode of the podcast. Thinking about playlists, I mentioned on the previous episode, 164, that it had been a while since I've updated the Apple Music podcast playlist and the Spotify playlist. As of today, those are both updated up to episode 164. After this episode comes out, I will continue to update those. And I will put links to those playlists here in the show notes for this episode. Both on Apple and Spotify, the playlist is called SARP, for Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. Music and Recovery. I also have SARP Spiritual Mixes, which is a list of all of my personal mix CDs combined into one long playlist. And also SARP Misfits of Recovery, which was based on episode 138, which had a lot of punk and hardcore. For anyone that was interested, over 70 songs in that playlist. The Music and Recovery playlist is now up to about 390. So a lot of songs there. I had 2 more songs that I wanted to play on this episode before closing it out. And one of them comes from Ben S., who did the narration for the Step 12 story that we heard on this episode. And this is a song by Avi Kaplan. I have played one of Avi's songs previously on the podcast. I first became aware of Avi as the bass voice for the a cappella group Pentatonics, and someone had sent me one of his other solo songs, and I can't remember which episode that I played it on, but it is the song called All Is Well, featuring Joy Williams. So the song that Ben had sent me via text last week is called I'm Only Getting Started, and really, really love this one. And so I wanted to play it on this episode, and especially since Ben did the voiceover for this episode. So here is Avi Kaplan with I'm Only Getting Started.
Eyes clouded, blood on my face, no mercy coming my way. Yeah, I'm only getting started. Cracked knuckles, a fist shaking. These rivers run, but I'm staying. Yeah, I'm only getting started. I'm bleeding now, but my fear is gone. I'm hollowed out, but I carry on. My bones don't lie, they're broken, but they still got fight. I'm only getting started. I'm only getting started. You set my fire, those flames are getting higher and higher. I'm only getting started. I'm only getting started. I'm only getting
Awesome. I love his voice, and I love the instrumentation on this one. Fantastic song. So the other song I've already played on the podcast back in December. It is by Tool. As I started talking about my hip problem back in December, it has really been up for me recently. I do have a date in September that I will be doing hip replacement surgery. And their song Invincible, the lyrics in this are just hitting me hard. And listening to it the other day, it's just like, oh, that's exactly what's going on with me. Beating tired bones, tripping through remember when. Once invincible, now the armor's wearing thin. Heavy shield down. A warrior struggling to remain relevant. A warrior struggling to remain consequential. And whew, am I feeling that right now. So here is Tool with Invincible. This is the second verse and chorus, which I didn't play on a previous episode. Yeah, love this song. I'm feeling a bit nervous about the surgery, but I'm also feeling very excited to be able to do things like hike and, just get up out of a chair without pain. It would be really, really wonderful. That's been on my mind recently. So there's a lot that I covered here in this episode. If you have any songs that you want to share with the podcast community or have any feedback about particular episodes, you can reach us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. If you want to get a hold of me personally or be a guest on the podcast, like the emails that I just read, you can reach me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com, and I'd be happy to see what we can do. I did record a few new episodes over the past few weeks. Like I mentioned, I lost the recording of a first step, so I'm going to try to reschedule that one or see if I can find a way to recover that file. But I will be reaching out to all the people that emailed me and start to schedule new recordings. With that, I am going to close out this episode. I thank you so much for tuning in, and as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.